It was a chilly morning in early autumn when I got the call. I was on my usual rounds, checking in with various farms, ensuring all the animals were in good health. But this call was different. The voice on the other end was panicked and urgent. "Dr. Matthews, we need you at Smith's dairy farm, right away. It's Daisy, one of our best dairy cows. She's really sick, and we don't know what to do." Daisy was a big, beautiful Holstein cow with black and white spots that made her look like a patchwork quilt. She had been a part of the Smith family farm for over 5 years, providing fresh milk to the local community. Everyone knew Daisy, she was a favorite. But now, something had gone wrong. I grabbed my veterinary bag and headed over, my heart racing a little with worry. When I arrived, the Smiths were waiting for me outside the barn, looking anxious. Daisy was inside, lying on the straw in her stall, her head low and her eyes dull. Mrs. Smith, who had been caring for Daisy for years, was beside herself. "She's not acting right, Dr. Matthews," she said. "She's been lethargic for the past few days, and her milk production has dropped significantly. Now she's just laying there, barely moving." I walked into the barn, immediately noticing how uncharacteristic it was for Daisy to be so still. Normally, she was a bit of a show-off, always first in line for treats and walking proudly around the barn. I knelt beside her, gently stroking her soft coat, trying to assess her condition. Her udder seemed swollen and tender to the touch. That was the first clue. Mastitis. It's an infection in the mammary glands, common in dairy cows, but if untreated, it can cause serious complications. The infection can lead to a drop in milk production, swelling, and, in severe cases, permanent damage to the udder. "I think Daisy has mastitis," I said, looking up at Mr. Smith. "Her udder is swollen, and she's in pain. We need to act quickly." Mr. Smith was visibly distressed. "What do we do? Is she going to be okay?" "Mastitis is treatable," I reassured him. "But we need to get started right away. The infection can worsen quickly, and if it does, it could spread to her bloodstream. We're going to need to give her antibiotics to fight the infection and make sure she stays hydrated." I turned to Mrs. Smith, who was already looking through the barn for the supplies I needed. "We'll also need to make sure we're milking her properly to clear out any infected milk. This will help reduce the risk of the infection spreading further." I started by carefully examining Daisy's udder. The swelling was quite noticeable, and there was a slight heat to the area, which indicated an active infection. It wasn't yet in the advanced stages, but it could easily progress if not treated properly. I carefully took a sample of the milk from her udder to examine it under a microscope. The milk was thick and clumpy, which is typical of mastitis. It's caused by bacteria, and the milk shows signs of inflammation. "Good news," I told them, "the infection seems localized to one side of the udder, which means it's not as severe as it could be. We can treat it effectively with the right antibiotics." I explained the treatment plan to the Smiths, making sure they understood the importance of following through with it. Daisy would need a dose of antibiotic injections over the next few days, and we would also have to milk her frequently to help clear the infection. I gave her the first injection right away, watching her closely as she responded. Daisy let out a low moan, but she didn't fight me. I felt a small sense of relief. This wasn't going to be easy, but it was doable. Over the next few hours, I spent time with Daisy, administering fluids to keep her hydrated, and making sure she was comfortable. We set up a milking schedule to help relieve the pressure on her udder, even though the milk she produced was thick and not suitable for sale. The goal was to drain the infected milk to prevent the bacteria from multiplying, and also to encourage the udder to return to normal. The first few days were critical. Daisy was clearly in pain, and it was tough for the Smiths to watch her struggle. But I assured them that we were on the right track. Each day, I returned to check on her, making adjustments to the treatment plan as needed. The antibiotics were beginning to take effect, and Daisy's condition slowly began to improve. She became more alert and started eating a bit more. Still, she wasn't out of the woods yet. During one of my visits, I noticed that her udder had begun to show signs of improvement. The swelling had gone down, and the heat was less intense. I milked her again and found that the milk was becoming thinner and less clumpy. That was a good sign. But Daisy's recovery wasn't just about the physical treatment. It was also about how she was handled. The Smiths were incredibly dedicated to her care. Every time I came by, they were there, comforting her, making sure she had everything she needed. Mrs. Smith even started sitting with Daisy while she rested, talking to her in a soft voice. Animals, especially cows, can sense when they are loved and cared for, and I could tell that Daisy was starting to respond to the attention. And then, after about a week of intense care, something happened that made my heart swell with hope. Daisy stood up on her own and took a few slow steps toward the barn door. It wasn't much, but it was a huge victory. She was getting stronger. "Look at her," Mrs. Smith said, her voice full of emotion. "She's walking." It was a small moment, but it meant the world. I knew Daisy was going to make it. The infection was under control, and she was slowly regaining her strength. But the journey wasn't over yet. Daisy still had a long road to full recovery. We had to keep an eye on her, continue with the treatment, and monitor her milk production. But for now, there was hope, and that's all we needed to keep pushing forward. That's when I left the Smiths' farm that day, knowing we were on the right path. Daisy had a chance, and I was optimistic. However, the real test would come in the next few weeks, as we had to wait and see how her body would recover and if she could go back to producing milk again. The first part of the journey was just the beginning. The first week after Daisy stood up was filled with cautious optimism. The Smiths were relieved, and I was hopeful, but we all knew that recovery from mastitis, especially a case as painful as Daisy's, required more than just short-term care. It was about rebuilding strength, ensuring no reinfection occurred, and gradually returning her to regular milking. I continued to visit every day. Daisy, though still slow-moving, greeted me with a soft moo each morning. Her demeanor was improving steadily. The signs were all pointing in the right direction. Her appetite was returning, the swelling in her udder had significantly reduced, and the consistency of her milk was nearly back to normal. However, the infection had taken its toll on her body. She had lost weight. Her coat, once glossy, looked dull. Her energy, though increasing, was still not what it used to be. I adjusted her dietary plan, recommending the Smiths supplement her feed with additional protein and minerals. Good nutrition was going to be just as crucial as the antibiotics had been. One afternoon, I arrived just in time to see Daisy walk from her stall to the pasture gate, a short distance, but an important step. She hadn't been outside since the onset of the infection. Mr. Smith opened the gate and Daisy, curious and cautious, stepped onto the grass. The rest of the herd noticed her immediately. Cows are social animals, and Daisy had been missed. One of her closest companions, a Jersey named Lily, ambled over and gave her a gentle nudge. Daisy responded with a low, familiar grunt. Watching Daisy rejoin her herd was more than just heartwarming. It was a signal that her psychological recovery was progressing alongside the physical. Isolation, even temporary, can stress livestock and slow healing. Rejoining the group, returning to routine, and having familiar interactions were key milestones in her journey. By the third week, the treatment had shifted. We had completed the course of antibiotics, and I had cleared her milk of infection. That was an essential step. If any bacteria remained, it could have spread again, either internally or through contaminated milking equipment. We also began doing what dairy farmers call stripping the quarter, manually expressing any remaining thick or clotted milk from the affected part of the udder, even after antibiotic treatment. It's slow work, but necessary. I trained Mr. and Mrs. Smith on how to do it properly, and they kept at it diligently. I also sent the milk samples to a lab for culturing. The results came back confirming the infection had been caused by Staphylococcus aureus, a bacterium that can be particularly stubborn and damaging if not caught early. We had been lucky. Had they waited even a day or two longer to call me, Daisy's outcome might have been far worse. Around day 25, something remarkable happened. Daisy returned to the milking parlor. We did a test milking, cautiously optimistic. I watched as she entered the familiar space, sniffed around, and then settled into her usual place. The Smiths had cleaned and sanitized every piece of equipment meticulously. Any trace of bacteria could risk reinfection. The first draw of milk was light and clear. No clots, no discoloration, no foul smell. I took a sample to test somatic cell count, which is a measure of udder health. The count was slightly elevated, which we expected, but within a range that indicated recovery rather than active infection. Mrs. Smith cried when she saw the milk flowing. "I was so afraid we'd lost her," she said softly. "She's not just any cow. She's Daisy." I understood what she meant. On small farms like the Smiths, animals aren't just numbers. They're part of the family. Daisy had been there through 4 seasons of calves, a summer drought, and a brutal winter. She was a strong producer, but more than that, she was a companion, predictable, gentle, and responsive. Losing her would have meant more than a financial blow. It would have left a hole in the heart of the farm. In the weeks that followed, Daisy's milk production steadily increased. She didn't reach her previous output immediately, but that wasn't the goal. Recovery isn't always about going back to the way things were. It's about stability, health, and functionality. Daisy was giving clean milk again. She had regained her weight. Her coat regained its sheen. Her eyes, once dull with fever and fatigue, sparkled again with life. One early morning, I arrived to check on her and saw something that filled me with quiet pride. Daisy was standing at the edge of the pasture, dew clinging to the grass beneath her. The sun had just begun to rise, casting an amber glow over the field. And beside her was a young heifer, only a few months old, nudging her side. Daisy turned, gave the calf a little nudge back, and then resumed grazing. "She's taken to mothering that one," Mr. Smith said, walking up beside me. Funny how they know. It wasn't one of Daisy's own calves, but she had adopted it just the same. She had always had a nurturing nature. Now that she was well again, she had found a new role, not just as a producer of milk, but as a matriarch of the pasture. I left the Smith farm that day with the satisfaction only our profession can offer. As veterinarians, we work long hours and face countless challenges. But the reward comes in moments like these, watching an animal return from the brink of illness to the heart of the herd. Daisy's case reminded me of why every detail matters: early detection, correct diagnosis, rigorous treatment, and patient care. Mastitis is common in dairy farming, but it's not routine. Every cow responds differently, every infection has its own course, and every farm has its own dynamics. There are no shortcuts. And in Daisy's case, what saved her was the Smiths' quick response, their devotion to her recovery, and a bit of luck that we caught the infection before it spread further. Today, Daisy continues to thrive. She'll never break milk production records again, and that's okay. She doesn't have to. She has a place in the herd, a place in the Smith family, and a story that reminds us all of what care, compassion, and timely veterinary intervention can do. For me, Daisy's story isn't just one of recovery. It's a testament to the bond between humans and animals, and the role of trust and knowledge in protecting that bond. As long as I practice, I'll carry this experience with me. Because Daisy wasn't just another patient. She was a reminder of why I chose this work in the first place.